Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast, hosted by longtime Northwest sports journalist Dan Viens. News, reaction, and opinion. In-depth analysis on everything Seahawks. And now, here's your host, Dan Viens.
Welcome to the Seahawks Forever podcast. I am your host, Dan Viens, and today we're going to talk dollars and cents. We have broken down the draft in just about every possible way. We are fully into the post-draft, kind of the thick of the offseason, but still lots of questions about what may still need to be done to the Seahawks roster before training camp opens and possibly how they can make that happen. And to talk about that, break that down and dissect it, I can think of no one that I would rather chat with than John Gilbert from the Field Gulls website. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Great to be here. Glad to come on and talk about one of my favorite subjects. So happy to try and answer some questions ahead of the doldrums of the summer off season. So
Indeed, it's funny. I think we're definitely in that kind of 90-day dead period after the draft. There's mini camps and things like that where you get stories about how guys look in person and up close. But for most people, this is the dead period. But I sense there is more excitement than ever among the fan base for the offseason stuff this year. I think because so many draft picks, so much youth, and there's excitement in that. And I don't know. My episode Friday did a record number of views because people are interested in this kind of stuff. So perfect time to have you on.
Oh, like I said, great to be here, and let's get to it. So,
well, let me start with this, kind of a technical question. So, John Schneider, I think across the board has been more open and transparent this year about the process than he ever has been, and part of that is he's made himself more available up until the draft, and then the 1 week after he did a weekly radio show here locally, and he as much as he's able to or willing to, he was pretty open about a lot of in-depth things. And one thing, he's using terminology this offseason that we haven't heard from him. He's talked more openly about cash and cap and than we've ever heard. What do you make of that?
well, it's not surprising, and the big reason it's not surprising is because of the cash shortfall from 2020, when there were no fans in the stands, it was billions in revenue that was lost by the league. That money gets split up obviously among the teams, and the owners basically floated a loan to the Players Association to make up the shortfall so that it wasn't all hitting the cap in one season. So it's getting broken up over 2022, over 2023. And 2023 should be the last season where that loan is a portion of the players' proceeds are going to pay back that loan. But what that does is it's created a situation where teams who are not as cash rich were tighter, constricted in terms of cash because they weren't getting they didn't have the stockpile that they had before because they had footed this loan. And this is, it's that last bite the bullet payment is the 2023 season. Basically, I would expect a lot of the cash issues for a lot of the teams, to be resolved across, by next spring when 2024 comes around. I don't think we'll hear as much about cash constraints, but it wouldn't surprise me given, I'm not super privy to the inner workings of Vulcan, but given the fact that they are, they're known to be, or their reputation is that they're frugal, that they don't waste a ton of money. I wouldn't be surprised if cash, not constraints, but internal constraints, as opposed to we just don't have the money in the bank account, would allow them to continue to operate, frugally going forward. Not to say that they're in no danger, I think, of missing payroll or anything, but it's one of those things where a lot of teams across the league are running into similar issues.
And that was my next question, because there was a really well done piece by Michael Shonduger of The Athletic a couple of weeks ago about this issue. And the reaction from some of the fan base was, oh no, Jody Allen's going cheap. There's cash issues. They're tightening the purse strings. Is it that, or is it just that she's bound by the foundation that technically owns the team and she has a budget to work with?
Yeah, it's a budget to work with, and it's, they started the plan for, they've been in the process of breaking apart the estate and selling it off for, we're coming up on 4.5 years now, but it is a massive estate. Obviously, they sold off, they've divested a significant amount of the resources, but there are other assets that are in the estate that aren't, they've got a significant exposure to commercial real estate, and obviously with what's going on in the commercial real estate market right now, it's not a great environment either. And so,
Yeah.
the Seahawks are I don't think they're, like I said, I don't think they're in danger of missing payroll or anything, but it's just like you say, because of the way it's set up, because of the way that they don't have, there are maximum thresholds for teams that they're, the league puts a cap on it. They, you might have a franchise like Washington Commanders that are worth $6 billion, but you can't go down to the bank and borrow $6 billion based off equity because the teams have an agreement with the league that it's capped, and it's relatively low compared to the value of most franchises. I believe it's $300 or $400 million. They increased it for COVID purposes to, in part, to give teams the breathing room they needed to fund through this. But with once everything is paid off, I mean, a big piece of it that even the players, we've seen these releases, these press releases this season. We saw it last off season with the performance-based play where they're getting basically paid per snap. And a lot of guys are getting $500,000, $600,000 bonuses. Those aren't actually, I mean, and you can go back, and Ode Ibushi tweeted about it a couple of years ago when he earned a few $100,000. They aren't getting paid out on those bonuses from the 2021 and 2022 seasons until 2024 when that loan is paid back. And so, that's where I think everybody's kind of looking forward to the windfall that's coming once that loan is paid off and the revenues are cleared out. And then that's when we'll really see, we've been talking about the cap exploding because of the new TV deals for a couple of years now, since they were signed back in 2020. And now, 2024, is when we're going to see, a big jump. We should see somewhere from, the neighborhood we're in now, 225 to the 256, possibly 260 range in a single offseason, which is just going to be massive.
Yeah. Well, and to your point as well, it's not like the Seahawks are being cheap in even the way they've gone about this offseason. They wrote a pretty big check to Draymond Jones and committed to a pretty good year one outlay of cash for him, and Geno Smith, of course, too. So, but we're going to talk more specifically about some things that they can do to create cap space in just a minute. But then, given that, does it make it less likely that one of the options to create any space would be converting salary to bonus for any of the players, where that might make sense because they'd have to write a check?
It's actually not. And the reason why is because for most players, even if they convert base salary to signing bonus, they don't have to cut the check right away.
Okay.
Most of them, if you're converting base salary to signing bonus, it's just an accounting process, and you are getting the exact same money over the exact same timetable as you would during the season. The only difference for the player, the advantage from a player standpoint, is that money then becomes fully guaranteed, as
Yeah.
opposed to, if I get cut at the end of training camp, I'm SOL. But, if they wanted to, go in and convert, they don't have a whole lot of options in terms of under 30 guys who are on a multi-year contract
Yeah.
that would be attractive to, I mean, obviously you could do it for DK Metcalf, who cares? He's going to be, hopefully he's playing for the Seahawks for another decade, but it's, there's not a ton of players that they could do that with. I think the extension, like you mentioned, there are going to be the more attractive, the options that more match the process that Schneider has talked about in the past.
Right.
Regarding fitting what they're looking to do.
See, that's why we have you on the show, because we learn stuff. Before we get to that, let's talk about today and where they stand right now. They have already signed one of their draft picks, 7th rounder, Kenny McIntosh. Obviously, that's the lowest slot that's available to them, and so the lowest outlay of cash. There seems to be some confusion or some disagreement about how much effective caps, or how much real cap space they have as we sit here today, and whether it's enough to sign the slotted amounts for the total draft class. John Schneider was asked in one of the press conferences right after the draft, hey, do you have enough? And he basically said, yeah, we do. But on paper, on all the different resources that we have to us as fans, and even the report the NFLPA came out with a couple of weeks ago would disagree with that. Where do you stand right now? What's your view of how much cap space they have at the moment?
They have cap space. If they want to make a move short term, they can. That's not going to stop them. Very quickly before I forget, just like you mentioned, Kenny McIntosh was, the lowest outlay of cash because he is literally, he's the 51st largest cap hit on the team. The to sign him, it cost them $22,000 in cap space. It was not, not a large outlay. And if they sign any other their other draft picks who have a larger cap hit, McIntosh cap hit falls off and they net it out. It's not, signing those day 3 guys are not going to be expensive.
So explain that real quick. This time of year, is it top 51 is all they're judged by, right?
Correct. From the start of the new league year, which is typically a random Wednesday in March, until the roster cut deadline at the end of training camp. They'll have a couple days actually after roster cuts to get in line with the cap, but you're only looking at the top 51 players. So what we'll see, my guess is what we'll see this week with, at some point we'll see the press release about the undrafted free agents, however many they sign, 25, 27, whatever the final number is. As long as none of those players have a cap hit that is larger than that of Kenny McIntosh, which is unlikely, given the limitations on their signing bonus that are restricted by the CBA, then you can sign all 27 of those guys for $0 cap dollars. There will be, so they'll fill out the roster. We'll get our draft picks in. Coming back to your question real quick, and I forget, I wish I had it in front of me, because there was something specific Schneider said. It was the way he said it, where, and I didn't get to see the video of him saying it. I just saw I saw the quote reported, and the way he said it, the way it was asked, it was almost as if he was saying that we don't need the money. We don't need to do anything right now to sign our draft picks, which is absolutely the case, because the draft picks, you don't have to have them signed. You don't have to have them on ink on paper until training camp.
Yeah.
So they can go through minicamp. They can go through OTAs, rookie minicamp. I guess they can't. OTAs are for veterans, but they can do everything that they need to do during the offseason up until, whatever it is, Monday, July 24th is when they need to have pen on paper so that they can go out on the practice field and not miss a lot of training camp. And so
that's an important, it's an important note, because if tomorrow, it's announced that the Seahawks go sign, John Smith, the nose tackle, and give him $5 million guaranteed on a 1-year deal, fans are going to scratch their head and go, wait a minute, now we can't sign our draft picks. And that's not the case.
Exactly. And there's no risk for the players. The players, they can participate in rookie mini camps. They can do the offseason work stuff for the team, and they are covered. There are liability waivers. As long as it is a football related activity. Dante Fowler was the famous incident where he went to rookie mini camp, blew out his ACL during camp, and it doesn't matter. You still, the team has to negotiate as if he wasn't injured. And so they're slotted. As long as you sign the contract, you know what you're paying them. Obviously, as long as you're not wrecking an ATV, you're going to get the money that goes to your slot. And so there's no risk to the players. Some of the players may need the cash. They may want it, so there might be some issues of, trying to balance that out, but we saw the Seahawks were one of the last teams in the league to sign a couple of their draft picks last year, with this, I believe it was the 2nd round picks, Boyamafe, Ken Walker. And that was all due to a guarantees issue that was negotiated that had changed, that, set some new precedents across the league. And it is what it is. I think it was 2 or 3 of the last 9 draft picks unsigned were Seahawks, but they were signed by training camp. It's nothing anybody should stress about at all.
Yeah. But the big question among fans these days, as it always is, but I think more so this year than ever, is how can we add more? Because I think the general feeling is, this is what I talked about on the show a couple of days ago, is they don't even have the bodies right now on the roster, not including the undrafted free agents, which haven't been officially announced as being signed yet, but they've all been reported. We know who the guys are going to be, but there's, as we sit here today, there's 5 healthy interior defensive linemen on the roster. Last year, they started on the 53 with 7 of them. So there just aren't enough bodies. Okay, maybe some of those undrafted guys make it, but fans feel really uneasy about the lack of veterans up there. And John and Pete themselves have been adamant this entire offseason, unwavering in saying, we want to add guys. We need to add guys. Carroll used the word need in reference to Poona Ford, who ended up signing in Buffalo. They kept talking openly about wanting Al Woods back. He just signed with the Jets. They have talked not quite as adamantly, but consistently about bringing Shelby Harris back. There's some other guys out there who could help. To do that, they would have to create some space. correct? And based on from where we sit now to where we would be if we signed all the draft picks, there just wouldn't be enough to sign veterans, would there?
Yeah, they would need to sign some. I mean, they would need to create some space somehow. If they were going to go outside and actually add, add veterans, add, to a significant contract. If someone's coming in, if a veteran's coming in on a veteran minimum benefit deal or a, $1.5 million, $2 million deal, yeah, you get one or two of those in, and they're going to have to add, to it. But they add to the space that they have available. But it's not. Again, it's something that where they can pick through who's out there for the entirety of the summer, and then whether it's an extension, whether it's a trade, whether it's something big that they do on the eve of training camp, or just convert, like I said, DK Metcalf's base salary to signing bonus this year, and they're or Tyler Lockett, and just say, hey, you know what, that's it, we're good, we've got the space we need, we can operate, we're fine. Again, you don't necessarily want to do that with Lockett because he's not the youngest of guys. Not to say that he obviously he's not ancient, and I hope he continues to play at a high level for several seasons to come. But it's he's the type of guy that I feel if the Seahawks go to him and they say, hey, Tyler, we need to create some space, we're going to, we need 3 million, we're going to convert whatever, to set it up. And, Tyler doesn't seem like the type of guy who's going to push back on that. So,
right. And isn't it true though, that the player doesn't have to agree if the Seahawks want to do a conversion?
Yeah, as long as it's in the contract. And that's, I don't want to say that specifically, but the Seahawks traditionally, they put the language in the contract that they don't need permission from the player, and that the team just gives notice. But I don't know that. I don't want to say that specifically about Lockett's contract, because we knew that specifically with Russell Wilson's deal a couple years ago, because Joel Corey, an agent from CBS, had tweeted that out. And we've heard that it's that it's typical for the Seahawks, a standard language in their contracts, but it's not. I don't want to say, oh, I know this specifically about Lockett's contract, and then somebody comes out and says, well, no, I've seen Lockett's contract, it's not. So it's but traditionally for the Seahawks, the majority of their veteran contracts will have that, where the players don't even have to sign off. The team literally sends an email to the agent and just says, hey, we're giving you official notice, we're converting base to, or signing bonus to base, or base to signing bonus, excuse me, and you're to free up cap space. There's no change for your client. It's just we just have to give the notice.
Well, and outside of that, we know that that's not the preferred route that John Schneider wants to take. He doesn't like kicking the can down the road, as it's been called, like so many other organizations willingly do. And in fact, you can make the argument that organizations like the New Orleans Saints, that's their strategy and that's their process. John doesn't like to do that unless it's absolutely necessary. In fact, the only time we've really seen him use void years was 2020, and that was
20 when
and they kind of had to just to add some talent and try to compete around Russ at the time. That being said, you look at this roster, and there really aren't any obvious cut candidates or cap casualty types. Those things have been taken care of already, mostly along that defensive line. But are there some opportunities with legitimate, responsible extensions for some players that could free up some immediate cap space?
There are a couple, and it would be interesting. One of the big one, and I think the one that everybody has kind of pegged and said, is Nwosu there at linebacker. I mean, he played phenomenal last year. He's still very young. I want to say he's 26 off the top of my head still. So, I mean, that's the kind of guy that you want to lock up. He coming off, he had a career year in 2021 for the Chargers, and then he had a career year for the Seahawks again in 2022, and he's still, next year, 2024 is probably his prime. So if you can extend him and keep him around on a deal that's reasonable, that's, gives him, upside protection or gives him extra cash, then that's one way to create space. They could, on the offensive side, we didn't really get as much production out of Fant after he came over from Denver as we had hoped. I think as many fans had hoped, but it is, again, it's a same boat. Is a highly productive, still very young, athletic, and the age of players that they have been committing to this offseason. We saw it with Julian Love. We saw it with Draymond Jones. The guys that they are signing, outside of Bobby Wagner, obviously, but Devin Bush, Julian Love, Draymond Jones, these are all very young guys to have, reached the end of their first contract, 24, 25, 26 years old. These are the age of players that they're certainly, I think that gives some extra, it's an extra energy to that, air of okay excitement and people looking forward to this season, because like these guys, we're not adding 31-year-old guys off the scrap heap.
Yeah.
Nothing against over 30 guys that we add to the defensive line, but it's just these are players in their prime or about to hit their prime, and it's very exciting in that. And if you can lock up a player like Fant or Nwosu, I think you do it in a heartbeat.
Nwosu's the guy that could create the most space, right? I'm off the top of my head now. I don't have it pulled up. I think he's set to make 13-ish.
They have 13.01.
Yeah.
The thing with him is that of that 13.01, there is only about 8.25 that's actually at play that they could that's because 4.75 of that is half of his signing bonus. That's locked in. Doesn't matter what they do. It's not going anywhere.
Right.
But if they they can extend him, and he's got 7.5 million base salary and 510,000 in per game roster bonuses. So about 8.1 million, or excuse me, just over 8 million that's at play there that you can work with in terms of how could you can give him that $8 million, whether it's $1.5 million in base salary plus a $6.5 million signing bonus, and then the signing bonus gets broken up over a few years. You can realistically easily create 4 or 5 million, a little bit more if you really wanted to get aggressive or creative on the structure, depending on how much they could how agreeable he is to potentially doing a deferred bonus or whatever it may be, like they've done in the past with some of their deals.
And it feels like, from all the numbers that I've seen, that's about all they would need if they want to do a couple of things as far as veteran additions. It based on your calculations, what's the approximate cap number for this year that it'll require to sign all 10 draft picks?
They really only at this point, and it's going to be interesting because the rookie pool came in a little bit lower than a lot of people were expecting. So they may, as much as we may sit here and I might overparse Schneider's words, they were not far away from being able to sign their draft picks as it is. They're, with their, they've got 5 or 6 million, whatever it is. They, all the reports were that they needed about 8.7 in space, but then those numbers came in a little bit lower than most observers were looking at, than were projected. In part because of the COVID revenue shortfall, those kind of things. And so if we're looking at a situation where they really only need 6.5, 7 million, I mean, they might only need 2 million of cap space, which is, I mean, you can shuffle things around, move things around. That's the kind of thing where, okay, if we need to convert base salary to signing bonus, they did that last year with Gabe Jackson. Again, not the ideal way to create cap space, but we've seen when they need an amount to be functional to operate, they can do it, and they could turn around. They could do that with Tyler Lockett in a heartbeat if they needed to, But if they sign, my guess would be that if they get an extension with someone like Nwosu, and then we don't see, outside of, obviously they've talked a lot about wanting to add more. They've talked about wanting to get more veterans on the defensive line. If they do go out and sign a couple guys, yeah, we need more space. But as it stands right now, if they extend Nwosu, they could sign all their draft picks, and create cap space in doing so. They could, sign their draft picks, get to the end of training camp. At that point, it becomes a matter of, okay, do we have enough for the practice squad? And depending on how aggressive they were with the extension, how much space it created, they should be able to do that. And then they might need to create some space for, operational functional purposes for injured reserve, practice squad elevations during the course of the season. But they don't need to go through and, have New Orleans Saints style off-season wholesale, convert base salary to signing bonus for 6 different guys on the roster in order to get through the season. If if they can put together a good deal with Nwosu, that'll be enough to get them through to where, okay, we can pay as we go, by converting either Diggs or Lockett or whoever we need to.
Do you happen to know off the top of your head approximately what the franchise tag number is for outside linebackers?
It is not small. I want to say it's $20 million.
I'm just thinking ahead to, if they're not able to come to an agreement.
It's for 2023, it is 20.9 million.
Okay.
Because there is they don't make any differentiation between outside linebackers and inside linebackers, and so it's all linebackers, and so it's all gets paid based off of edge rushers, and you're all paying Khalil Mack money for for anybody who's got the linebacker designation.
So let's talk about the next couple of years and how does it look moving forward? If there are things that they need to do that push things off into the future or signing extensions, and they've been really good in the past about signing extensions to current players and coordinating when the biggest cap hits would be based on their future charts and how they see things mapping out. So we've just seen 2 back-to-back years where they've added large, high quality, young draft pick, 2 draft classes that are universally lauded as quality. And then they signed the biggest undrafted free agent class in the league this year, the biggest one they've ever signed. And it appears that they fully intend to fill out the back end of that roster with some young talent. So that would lend itself to one thinking that cap's going to be easier to manage over the next couple of years. We also know that they're paying their starting quarterback mid-level quarterback money, which is a class that we didn't think even existed until Geno signed his deal this year. So how do you feel about, and how can fans feel about 2024, 2025 as you look ahead to kind of keeping some of these young guys around? Because it doesn't seem like, other than Nwosu, which we just talked about, that they have any Geno Smith type pressing emergency contract situations coming up.
Yeah, and they don't. There's nothing. I mean, as the joke obviously here is that as long, one of the upside of having poor draft classes is not having to extend guys. And unfortunately, it's not all been about just bad players or players not panning out. Marquise Blair, obviously injuries. Cody Barton was fine at what he did, but he was just not fine for what the Seahawks have, when they drafted him in 2019, he filled the role they needed from that position fine. Now they've shifted scheme. They ask a little bit something different of their linebackers, and he's not a great fit. So fine, he's off to Washington. That's the one side of the story. The flip side of the story is that they did take significant dead cap from Russell Wilson. And so he's off the books. And yeah, you've got a year of Geno Smith at a reasonable amount. But Geno is, he's not market rate, but $31 million in 2024 is certainly, it's almost what Russell Wilson was making, on a per year basis. And it's not, it's not prohibitive. It's not 50 million or 52 million a year like the top of the market, but it's still more expensive than 13, 14 million that he's at this year. And then you add on top of that, there's a lot of the big questions this year. I think we'll see how things play out on the field. Is Jamal Adams is number one. I mean, he carries it's just 2024. It is a massive $23.6 million cap hit. For a safety, and it's what are they going to get out of him? I mean, it's 13 games in the last 2 seasons. What's that worth? And how quickly would they move on from him if he's not coming back, if he's not back to where he was? And his knee injury is not, it's unfortunate, but it's not the type of knee injury that players, come back from at the same level they were before. Now, he was a very high level player. So you would expect him to be able to come back at some level, but will it be enough to justify that contract? So I think, they'll have space 2024 2025. It's not like they're certainly, I'm not trying to paint where the Saints were 100 million over the cap. They're under the cap. They'll have free cap space, but I don't think there won't be giant shopping sprees. There may be the pick and choose of let's splurge signing a Draymond Jones, a Julian Love, whatever it may be. But it's not going to be to go out and build through free agency. If you can target a core player at a key position of need, fantastic. Add that player, go in and take advantage of it. But I don't think they're going to be. I think hopefully they're done with the days of let's bring in these guys on 1-year deals that are significantly overpriced, that where we're just looking to fill a hole for a single season because we think we're a player away, when that money could be put so much more well spent to someplace else. I think we'd all love to have the 7 million from Luke Jokelback or the 9 million from Ziggy Ansah. It's just
name that popped into my head.
Yeah, I think it's the first name that pops into everybody's head. And it's you add all those up over time, and it's like, man, we can buy a pretty nice player for $40 million or whatever it is. And so you get to the point where it's, I think I think that we've seen a whole lot of their shift in strategy. They've been very open about it, but we've seen they've absolutely changed how they draft in the past couple of years. They've absolutely changed, how they go out in free agency, which we saw with the biggest free agency contract they've ever given, both on a per year basis and an absolute dollars basis. It's clear that they have shifted what they're doing, and they've changed, the way they're approaching everything. So it's not quite as clear as things were in the past, but it's not it's not going to be a situation where we're sitting here saying like, oh man, are we going to have the money to retain whoever it may be when their contract is up? What's the stress there? Is the when the draft classes come up for hit free agency, it's like, okay, if we want to extend Jordan Brooks, we can. It's not. It's just a matter of is there a palatable deal that's in there? It's not a matter of he's worth 10 million a season or whatever it may be, and we don't have 10 million available in the books, so bye. It's just it's a much more pleasant conversation of, okay, how do we want to allocate our dollars versus where do we want to find the dollars that we need to allocate. So
yeah, well, and it's interesting you mentioned Jordan Brooks. We didn't talk about him. He would be one of the obvious ones next year. And Carroll was effusive this week about how he sees a long future with him in the team, and they refused to pick up that 5th-year option, as a lot of teams did. This, I think, a record number of first-round draft picks from the class 4 years ago. The 5th-year options were not picked up. It just seems to be the kind of the modus operandi of teams now. They just want to wait and see, and maybe use the salary or the franchise tag if they have to. Yeah, a lot of interesting things looking forward, and it'll be cool to see the way it plays out. And it's good to know that we have you anytime we have any questions about salary cap. I hope that listeners and viewers today learned something. I know I did. John, thanks for your time, and I really appreciate your insight into this subject.
Hey, thanks for having me. Great to be here. Invite me on anytime, and happy to share. When we're up and ready to go.
Absolutely. We'll talk to you again soon. Thank you, John.
All right.
That's going to do it for the show here today. Thank you for listening. As always, follow me on Twitter at Seahawks Forever. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. The channel is growing. Want you to be part of the community. And as always, appreciate the support. Going to be catching up with Dana O'Gorman soon. She says she is rested and recovered from the draft. I want to get her on the ground experience from that. Griffin Sturgeon will be joining me next week as well. We're going to talk some scheme and how he sees some of those rookies fitting in. And Jackson Bevins and I of the Cigar Thoughts podcast are working together on a time over the next week to get together and get his recap of the draft, because he, more than anyone else out there, man, he had some gut feelings about some of these guys and really nailed a couple of the Seahawks picks. And he's probably still on cloud 9 about all that. Until then, thanks again for listening. I am Dan Viennes. We'll talk to you soon.